All right, now we're good. We'll talk again, like I said, all about assessing capacity for running a SNAP E&T program, mapping some staff tasks and things that will be needed to be done, who is currently doing something like that. We have a guest speaker. Hello, Megan. I see you're on the call. We'll let her introduce herself. I don't want to spoil our guest speaker, but welcome. And then we'll have time for some Q&A and then reminders for about our next training session. So without further ado, I would love to welcome Refugee Artisan Initiative. Are you guys on the call?
Hi, yes, we are.
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
So I can give you just a 60 seconds
Hi.
to say hello, give us the TLDR of who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Fatma Aram. I'm a grants and development coordinator.
And I'm Khadija Bashiri, working as a workforce development manager at Ray.
We recently joined the team within the last year, so bear with us as we share. So Array, or Refugee Artisan Initiative, was established to work with immigrant and refugee women who would be able to upcycle and keep virgin materials from being like distributed, and kind of incorporate a component of sustainability, and remove hard to recycle waste out of the waste streams. And so these women kind of get trained through Ray's program in order to build the skills that they come in with. So you can share how like a lot of women come in with a lot of cultural sewing skills,
Yeah,
and
as
build that up.
Fatima mentioned for you, yeah, Refugee Artisan Initiative is a nonprofit organization based in Seattle, Washington State, and we are working with immigrant and refugee women. And these women coming to USA with, they have different skills for sure, but it's really hard for them to, I mean, they have lots of challenge like language barrier, skills, experience, childcare, but they all came to Ray. This is a great place for them to grow because we are not just trying to give them some training to learn and expand their skills, but also we give them some works to do. And our model is like working from home. They're coming here for learning the sewing and tailoring, and after a while, when they, I mean, improve to other level, intermediate and advanced level, we also give them some work to do in their home. And this is an amazing opportunity for them to grow. And after a while, and specifically because we expand our program and we want to be like a pipeline to onboard them to other job placements outside. And that's a great opportunity for them to grow and to learn. Yeah.
So she's our
Great.
development program. And I guess all that to say that we have a lot of development of skills that
Yeah.
put them into the workforce. And it's so popular in terms of Ray being a program. We have over 250 people on the wait
Oh,
list like that.
Even
So
more than that. Yeah.
yeah. So
wow.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to our SNAP E&T cohort.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Just a couple of reminders, mute yourselves, background noise, cats, I love them, but less distractions, always good. Please, any question you have, you can pop off mute, drop it in the chat. That's what we're here for. Um, if you need to take a break, feel free to do so. These are recorded and posted on our landing page. So if you ever need to revisit a topic or a training, those are always available to you. And no question is too small or silly to ask. We encourage any and all questions that you might have. This stuff is pretty complicated. You have to hear it a few times. So we are here for you. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our facilitators today, our good friends Tyree and Riley from Center for Employment Opportunities. Take it away.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. My name is Tyree Swinsky. I am the project manager at Center for Employment Opportunities on the strategy and platforms team. My job is simple, is to make complex things as simple as possible. Sometimes I do it. Sometimes I'm still trying to figure it out. But we'll see how this goes today. I'm going to pass it over to Riley to explain her position and explain Center for Employment Opportunity.
Thanks, Tyree. I think I've had the chance to meet hopefully most of you by this point, but yep, my name is Riley Webster. I'm on the policy team at CEO, so I work a lot with our government partnerships, the largest being SNAP E&T. So really coming to this work as an organization that has been through this process in a couple of different states in a couple of different ways, and hoping to work with you all to let you all know what we know. So looking forward to today.
Perfect. So first, we're going to kick it off with a refresher from our last time we met with the service mapping session. Remembering that SNAP E&T isn't about building an entirely new program. It's about matching and mapping key SNAP E&T components into the great employment and training work your organization is already doing. In other words, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to bolt on the SNAP specific pieces where they fit best. Going on to the next slide, when we're talking about the components, the SNAP E&T components, FNS breaks it up in three different categories. We talked about this at our last webinar, but just a quick refresher. The goal, of course, across all of them is to increase employment, placement rates, and job sustainability. Three categories that they break it up in is education, work experience, non-education, and work experience. Yes, FNS is food and nutrition services. Thank you, Samantha. Education range from basic literacy all the way up to industry recognized credentials, any standard and certified curriculum that builds participants' technical, digital, or soft skill foundation. And a key thing is it has to be directly tied to employment. Work experience ranges from paid internships to on the job training to unpaid placements. In very few states, there's even a work fair where participants earn off benefits cross costs through community service. And then they have the non-education, non-work components, which the core supports like job search, work readiness workshops, and job retention services. Although they aren't formal education or placement, they're still essential to helping someone find and keep a job. Across all three, of course, remembering from our last session, and we'll probably say this a lot, we're matching these components into the great work you already do. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, just strategically place what you do into what is already eligible. Going to the next slide with that quick review, just want to do a quick post check before we move on. Everyone, I like the idea of grabbing the chat. Get your fingers ready to type in one word. Just one word we're asking you to tell me how you're feeling or tell us how you're feeling about the service mapping exercise that we did in the previous one and through your one-on-ones. Type in win if you feel you've nailed how your SNAP E&T boat onto your existing services. So type in win if you feel like you have a good understanding of how your services match the SNAP E&T services. Type gap if there's still something you need clarified. Remembering that if you type gap and want to come off mute, you can. Or if you would rather do it on your one-on-one, I strongly suggest you write down your questions and email them directly to your designated TA provider. Don't try to wait because we have 1,000 things happening at one time. We probably won't remember. And then type staff if you're ready to jump into mapping rows to those SNAP components. So type win if you've nailed where your alignment is, type gap if you're still trying to figure it out, and then type staff if you're ready to move on to today's topic. I see it coming in. I'm not alone. Riley, there's people that are listening. Awesome. So it seems that we are ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Riley to get us started on our staff mapping exercise.
Thanks, Tyree. Yeah, so as Tyree mentioned, today we're going to move from services mapping into staff mapping. And so where does that fit into our lovely diagram that hopefully you all are becoming more and more familiar with? You will definitely be familiar with it by the end of this cohort. It's where we like to start all of our trainings. But as we discussed multiple times, we're really trying to find alignment in five key areas. And today we're going to really hone in on that capacity circle there. And when we say capacity, we're referring to the infrastructure and the staffing that's in place and necessary to fulfill the administrative and programmatic requirements for SNAP E&T. So the past training and the past couple one-on-ones, we've been in that services circle to try and find alignment. We're now going to move into that capacity one today. Next slide, please. Tyree has already done a great job setting this up, so I don't want to belabor the point here, but we do just want to always remind folks, again, not about reinventing the wheel, not about starting a new program. This is really about finding alignment with what you're already doing. And in this case today, with the staff that you're currently working with, to be able to administer the SNAP E&T program. So we'll go over some of the SNAP E&T tasks that may be newer or required for running a SNAP E&T program that you're not already doing. But the idea is really to figure out what staff are doing similar things so we can fold that in to existing roles, maybe by adding some training, but we don't want you leaving here today feeling like you have to hire whole new teams to make this happen. So just want to set the tone up front. Thanks, Samantha. Next slide. So when we talk about staff mapping, I think it's helpful to think about it in kind of two main steps. And the first is really identifying the functions or elements of a SNAP employment and training program. So what does it take to run a SNAP E&T program? What is it you'll actually have to do as a SNAP E&T third-party partner? So we've come up with like a couple of little categories or buckets for you to think through. One being program entry. So folks have to get into your program one way or another. And the first thing you all are likely doing with them is going through some sort of orientation, intake, and assessment process. So that's something you guys, like I said, are probably already doing. As a SNAP E&T third-party provider, what you'll have to build into that process is letting folks know about the SNAP E&T funded program you're operating, and making sure and assessing whether your participants are on SNAP and thus eligible for SNAP E&T. So again, thinking about what you're already doing as part of your orientation process and thinking about this piece that you'll have to kind of add in. And we'll dive into this piece in more detail in a little bit. What else do you have to do? You have to deliver services. That's what we spent a lot of time talking about, what you're already doing, delivering those case management services, delivering those employment and training services, providing participants with the supports they need to be successful in those services. So if you're an organization that provides gas cards or buys folks the tools they need to participate in your program already, as we discussed during the services mapping, that's something you can get reimbursed from SNAP E&T for. If you're already doing that, great. With the SNAP E&T provider reimbursement, you'll have to think about how are we coordinating those services? How are we tracking those expenses to get reimbursed on later? So again, just thinking about the little extra piece you might have to think about. Same with data collection. It's likely the case that you're already collecting some data on your participants. That's great. As a SNAP E&T third-party partner, there might be kind of specific data pieces that you'll have to collect. There definitely will be specific data pieces that you'll have to collect. So thinking about how to build that into your current data collection structure, thinking about how to report that back to the state and how to build in those processes so you're doing that on the timeline that the state or county requires. Budgeting and fiscal, again, there's probably something in this that you all are already familiar with. Managing other grants, having to track expenses. The two things we just really wanted to call out to start thinking about with this becoming a SNAP E&T third-party partner is that annual budget preparation process. So how do you build up a budget of expenses for SNAP E&T? And then how do you invoice against that budget on a monthly or quarterly basis? So what are you doing already that's similar to that? And how can we kind of just add this in? And the last piece is program oversight. So it is SNAP E&T, it's a federal funding stream. It would be kind of a contract between you and a county or state agency. So there's that contract management aspect to this that I was going to say is not unlike other contracts. It's probably not true. There's some unique aspects of a SNAP E&T contract that you'll have to work through, but thinking through what examples do you have to kind of pull from the compliance and program monitoring. Again, it's federal funding stream, so compliance and program monitoring, part of the deal, and liaising with the SNAP E&T agency. So really maintaining that good relationship and rapport and communication, just another key kind of element of running a SNAP E&T program. So next slide. And then of course, the second piece of staff mapping is the staff, right? So who's actually going to do all of those things that I just mentioned. And similarly, I think it's helpful to think about your staff in kind of groups based on function. I want to flag here that these are just categories that I think are helpful to think through. Understanding the job titles in your organization might be very different. You might not kind of think of them and have these demarcated groups out like this, but this is just helpful to think of staff in terms of kind of their function and where they fit in. So who are your frontline staff? Who are the ones that are delivering the services? Your case managers, your employment specialists. Who's the one that's interfacing with participants as they come into the program? Who's the one helping to match them to jobs? Who's actually providing the skills training? Who's supporting those folks? So maybe they're not the ones that are providing the services directly, but they're helping coordinate those behind the scenes, or they're the ones that kind of know the data really well. Who are your administrative folks? Who's managing the program? Who's really good at that contract management piece? And then of course your organizational leadership, right? Who's kind of steering the ship, can really be in charge of overseeing some of those program oversight things that we talked about. And then who's on your fiscal team? Who's your staff accountant? Who's your fiscal analyst? Who's the one that you're going to kind of task with tracking those expenses? Again, I think these are helpful categories, not meant to imply that you have to have all of these different teams built out. I work in a nonprofit. I know that there is probably one staff member who falls in multiple of these categories and wears multiple hats. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about how we can map those folks onto those functions. Next slide. And so those two pieces come together in the staff mapping tool. So when you're going through the tool, which is linked on the landing page, will be sent in the follow-up. We have a little screenshot here just to provide some context. You will be doing both of those two pieces that I just talked about. So step one, reviewing the SNAP E&T function. So that's that first column there. It lays out all of the different SNAP E&T functions that you'll have to take on as a SNAP E&T provider. So I think really spending some time going through those, thinking about, okay, where in our program model or our program operational structure are we doing something? Are we doing something already that's exactly like this, or doing something very similar? So spending some time familiarizing yourself with those different functions. And then step two, in that next column to the right there, who is currently doing that task at your organization? Again, it doesn't have to be a perfect one-to-one match. We understand there will be some pieces that you're not yet doing that you would only do if you were SNAP E&T third-party provider. We'll get into that. But what staff is doing the function that's closest to this, and who do we think with a little bit of training, with a little bit of adjustment, could really take on this piece of running a SNAP E&T program? And then that third step, what do we need to change or adjust to get somebody to the place where they can really own that role? So for the intake coordinator position or the intake and assessment, maybe somebody's already doing those intake assessments. They might even already be asking folks what benefits they're receiving. Maybe just that added tweak of, okay, verifying whether somebody's on SNAP. How would we train that person to do that? What would we needed to do that is what we can start thinking about in that last column there. So that is the staff mapping tool. Again, really, I think spending some time in that first column, making sure like we're understanding what those different functions are. And I think bringing any questions that you have to those one-on-ones about, like, we just don't really feel like we have someone in this role yet. What exactly does it mean to, track expenses and do a quarterly invoice? Like, if there's anything that's feeling unclear, it's a great question to bring up in those one-on-ones. I want to dive a little bit into the program entry piece, but before I do, just wanted to pause and see if folks have any questions about filling this out over the course of your next kind of one-on-one. Okay. Not seeing any questions, but as Terry mentioned, email us, ask us in the one-on-ones. We'll spend a lot of time we'll spend a lot of time on this, so no worries. Yeah, next slide. So one thing we wanted to just dive a little bit more deeply on is this program entry piece. As I mentioned, a lot of the functions that you'll see on that staff mapping tool are likely things that you're already doing in some way, shape, or form as part of your program processes. But there just might be some things that have to be kind of added, where you just have to think a little bit about how to incorporate. And one of those areas I think is program entry. So again, you're likely already bringing folks into the program and orienting them to your services in some way. You're enrolling them, you're doing some sort of assessment on the front end, which you're probably not doing in a formal way, because why would you? There's no requirement to do so unless you're a SNAP E&T third-party partner, is verifying whether they are in fact on SNAP and eligible for SNAP E&T. And so I just want to dive a little bit more into kind of what that process looks like. Next slide, please. So I think starting with the question of how do your participants become SNAP E&T participants? There are two main pathways that can happen. One is called a direct referral, and that's where an individual goes to the SNAP E&T agency, so the state or county agency, and the SNAP E&T agency screens them, verifies their SNAP eligibility, and enrolls them in SNAP E&T. So that participant is enrolled in SNAP E&T before they even come through your doors. So the SNAP agency will then refer that verified eligible SNAP E&T participant to a provider such as yourselves. That individual that's referred from the county or state agency, you'll know that they're coming in the door as a SNAP E&T participant. You're able to enroll them in your services, communicate back to the county or state agency that, yep, we got the referral, they're participating in our services, they're participating in our SNAP E&T program, and you're good to go. You're good to start serving them and expensing for that reimbursement. The most likely avenue, though, for you to get participants into your SNAP E&T program, this is probably where you're going to get most of your folks, is what's called a reverse referral. So the beginning of that process looks probably pretty similar, if not identical, to how things are currently running in your program, right? Someone comes through your doors, through your existing referral or recruitment pathways. And during intake and enrollment, you would go through kind of your normal intake and enrollment process, but staff would have to evaluate and assess whether or not an individual is on SNAP and eligible for SNAP E&T. For those individuals that are on SNAP, so you're able to verify that with the county that they're on SNAP, staff would communicate and verify that with the state or county agency and ask that they be enrolled in SNAP E&T. So that's that kind of communication backwards. We want them to be in SNAP E&T. We verify they're on SNAP and eligible. It may be the case that folks who are coming to your program through your existing pathways are already on SNAP. There may be some folks who are not yet on SNAP, but you are pretty confident that they're eligible for SNAP. And so in that case, staff could then help those folks sign up for SNAP, get on SNAP, and then go through this reverse referral process where you say, yep, we verified that someone's on SNAP, they're eligible for SNAP E&T, communicate that to the county and state agency, and then kind of able to enroll them in SNAP E&T services. And so I just wanted to kind of call those two mechanisms out, just because I don't think we've talked about those referral pathways yet, but also just to note that in both cases, there's likely some staff time, staff effort, new learning that's going to have to go in to building out that intake process just a little more fully as a SNAP E&T provider than you might already have. So that's one of those examples of, okay, I can think of who's doing something similar. What are some things we need to build in to kind of get there, and what staff training might be required? Next slide, please. And so we just kind of talked about the verifying SNAP eligibility. So that's those first 3 squares there, right? We get people into our program, we enroll people in our program, we make sure that they are SNAP E&T eligible, they're referred into SNAP E&T, we're ready to go, right? Those first 3 squares are really that program entry piece that we just talked about. So once, like I said, once they're eligible, once they're verified, enroll them, we're ready to go. We then have to make sure that they maintain their SNAP eligibility, right? So you're only able to bill for SNAP E&T services if the individual is on SNAP. If the individual goes off of SNAP in a month for lots of different reasons why that happens. That's another thing that staff can be helpful with, is helping people navigate their changing benefit status. But we need to check before we bill every month that the person is in fact still on SNAP in the month that we are billing those services for. So there's the staff time required on the front end to make sure folks are eligible, and then ongoing throughout the program, making sure that they are maintaining their eligibility. And we're checking in on that kind of throughout the lifetime of the time the participant spends in your program. So again, thinking about how this relates back to staff, maybe that's one person that's doing that throughout the whole process. Maybe it makes sense for the program entry piece to live in one role and the ongoing eligibility to live in another. Just something for you all to think about as you're going through those different functions and staff roles. Next slide. So before we jump into the guest speaker, which I know I'm personally very excited for, do want to pause just one more time to see if there are questions about the tool, about how to think about those different functions, think about the different staff categories. Anything coming up for folks? Okay. Well, Tyree, pass it to you.
Perfect. Perfect. We have experts in the webinar, so this is nice. I'm excited about this conversation, partly because I got a chance to work with Megan in Working Fields last cohort, so I'm personally involved or invested, but also because I get to interview, which is my favorite thing to do in the entire world. So I'm excited for this. Megan is from Working Fields. Working Fields is a staffing agency built on a mission of second chances and social responsibilities. They use a unique peer support model to help motivated jobs seekers succeed, and they place candidates in entry level to senior roles across Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maine. Job seekers receive ongoing support through peer coaching and strong employer partnerships. Personally, what amazed me the most with dealing with Working Fields, and Megan specifically, is how ready and equipped they were to apply everything that we learned, that they learned, should I say, that we were presenting. It made us feel very good because we saw that the tools were very useful, but it also helped us to apply the hands-on programmatic, the hands-on knowledge that's needed to see how this works in the real world. So I introduce to you all Megan as she comes on, and if she wants to introduce herself before we get into the interview. You're on mute, Megan.
Yeah, if I can find the mute button with my cursor. Hi, everyone. Thanks for that intro, Tyree. My name is Megan Vanstry. I'm the finance and admin manager at Working Fields. So that'll come up, I think, as we kind of go through the mapping tool a bit more, because my position comes up in a few different spots on the mapping tool. But yeah, I think as Tyree was saying, we did the cohort last year, and it was really great timing because we applied to become an E&T provider to start fiscal year 2025. So we started in October of last year as a first time E&T provider. So it was really great timing to kind of get the background info on what is SNAP E&T, how are we going to implement this, and really in like real time went from like mapping things out to like jumping into implementing, and now I've been meeting with Tyree and Riley to go through our next year's budget on, okay, this is how we implemented this year. What did we learn from that? And how do we adjust our budget and our operations to kind of finesse that even more for the next year?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So let's get into these questions so we can leave room if you all have questions as well to ask. First things first, how did the mapping tool help your organization in the early stages of determining alignment when it came to SNAP E&T?
Yeah, so it was really helpful for us to kind of walk through the process. And I'm a very visual, like I love a process like flow map of like, okay, when a participant comes to us, like where's their first point of entry? And then kind of how do they kind of move through our services that we give? And what are we doing currently that aligns with that? And who are those people? So it was a lot of identifying who in the organization is currently doing tasks that are going to connect with those folks. So like Kate was doing our intakes, which we do all of the time. And then we kind of identified, okay, so that's the best point to do our eligibility check, and connected the dot there. So kind of going through what are folks currently doing, and how does that align with SNAP E&T? And then what are things that people aren't necessarily doing, but will kind of mesh well with their skill set or where they meet with folks, where we need to like add things in to meet up with requirements for like record keeping and things. Yeah, so I think that was it was a good walkthrough of who do we have on the team, what are they doing, and is there going to be like needed capacity for those folks to add in, and like kind of what level is that?
I love that. I'm a visual learner too. So whenever it comes to visual things, you'll notice when I do slides, the visualization of it. I like to see what it is I'm talking about more than read what I'm talking about. What aspects of mapping staff to SNAP E&T functions did you find to be the most challenging for your organization? And what areas did you realize your staff were already doing similar functions?
Yeah, so I think the intake was a good example for eligibility checks that mesh like really well. And then our case management is we use peer coaches that like are super one-to-one aligned. Like all of our peer coaching is case management, and our peer coaches already submit reports every week when they meet with someone. So it's really just copy and pasting the reports we already get from our coaches into the system for case management notes. And that's like a super easy thing. The kind of area where we needed to add on to that was like, okay, we have like 20 or 30 coaches or however many coaches. They're not all going to have access to the state of Vermont system for Vermont calls SNAP E&T ICANN. So who internally is going to be the person that does like the copy and paste, to have that like little transition. And then I think also most challenging is Vermont uses a system called Vermont Job Link. And I think that was the biggest thing of like the technology side of like people, I think at a high level understand the SNAP E&T program and understand how it aligns with their job, but the record keeping and tracking of, okay, now I'm adding all of these kind of like notes I need to take about folks, and then they need to get entered into the system that I'm not familiar with. So that was a big technology and systems gap there.
And I want to ask a follow-up. How did you overcome that challenge with
Um,
technology?
we worked really closely with our like state folks at the state of Vermont have been really great and have provided a lot of like one-on-one training. So we've done like a few training sessions. A lot of it is just like kind of giving yourself grace to like, you're not going to learn it until you get enough volume to learn it. So it felt like a really slow and like hard learning curve for us, because when we started with SNAP E&T, we had a really low volume of people, and you're not really going to learn something that's a complex kind of process in like this like kind of outdated computer like software by doing it like once every month for like 3 months. Like that's not a great way to learn something. So it wasn't really until we started getting kind of just like more interaction with the system that we were learning it better. And then also kind of, I think the other thing that was helpful was I think we originally had it mapped out that a lot of staff were going to have a lot of interaction with it, but ended up kind of falling into having one person be the subject matter expert on the system, and taking pretty much all of the enrollments and stuff in the system. So that way they were getting the volume, and then they can be that kind of expert to help other people when they're learning how to get in there and get stuff updated.
I love how you said to give yourself grace as you learn it. One thing that we've learned with SNAP E&T is that we can build processes, but we have to be adaptable to whatever is to come in order to increase our efficiency. Another thing that hits me is when we say practice makes perfect, which is a lie. Practice creates progress, right? So it's as we continue to practice on things, we continue to create more and more progress towards a more perfected process.
Mhm.
I think another thing I want to point out is that your peer support people are what does case management. In our one-on-ones, we saw a lot where they asked, do we have to have them titled case managers? And you don't have to have them titled case managers. You just have to have them do that role. So I love that you
Exactly.
spotted that out as well. How has your use of the staff mapping tool evolved as you become a third-party partner? And have you revisited the tool as part of the SNAP renewal process?
Yeah, so we definitely had some just like internal organizational changes that have really shifted things. So the person that was originally doing intakes and eligibility checks is no longer at the company, so that shifted roles. And then like my counterpart on more of like the like leadership level is also not with the company anymore. So there's been different roles that have shifted a bit. And I think I was reviewing the mapping tool today, kind of like preparing for this a little bit and looking back at it, which was fun. And I think it was really helpful to see like this is kind of the idea that we originally had, not knowing what we didn't know. And then kind of as you go through it, when you learn more and more, you kind of figure out what does work and what doesn't work. So things have definitely shifted a good amount. The case management is a good one of like that was pretty even of like that didn't shift a lot. But I think what we had our account managers take on, who are doing the more supervised job search and job retention support, that's kind of shifted from them taking a step back to them stepping kind of back into a more direct role with record keeping and stuff.
I love that, and that brings to our mind that these tools aren't something that's like a one and done, but there's something that you can use throughout your process, even as you're going through renewing and you're implementing the learnings that you gain through the practice, I guess you would say. In what ways can the staff mapping tool be helpful for communicating with your staff internally about SNAP E&T who may not be familiar with it yet?
Yeah, so a lot of it is that sort of like translation of like case management equals peer coaches. Like our peer coaches do the job that they do. They don't necessarily need to know that it's case management if they're not like really involved with SNAP E&T. They might need to know, like they need to know that their participants can get access to participant reimbursements. Like that's the important stuff that they need. They don't necessarily need to know the like all of like the kind of like labels and stuff with it. So identifying, I think the training section of this is really helpful to think out like, okay, what are the roles that people are doing and what training do they need in order to be able to like do that successfully? Whether that's like just understanding SNAP E&T eligibility and general overview of the program, like participant reimbursement, or like for my role of I'm doing more of like back-end invoicing and record keeping and things like that. Figuring out what I need to know for that. And I think that was something that I kind of noticed looking through the staff mapping tool today was that I think we did a better job at identifying for other team members what information they need and anything that was a task that like I was going to do because I'm kind of implementing, I'm like, oh, I'll figure that out later. And then didn't like do as much work to identify like if I needed more training and support for myself for things. And here we are like a year later, and I'm meeting with Riley being like, how do we invoice for this? And like, how, like, can we put this in our budget? And those are all of the categories that I put my name on in the staff mapping, but didn't put what supports I needed.
Yes, yes. Hindsight is 2020. I definitely understand that. Taking care of self. We do want to open it up for questions from the people who are in the audience. If you have any questions for Megan, or in her position as working field, especially as someone who's used the staff mapping tool, but also as someone who is already a third-party partner and on their way to renewing. So we want to open the floor up for any questions that you may have. You can do it in the chat or come off mute.
Terry, I have one if folks are gathering their questions. I have one if it's okay.
Yeah,
Um,
perfect.
yeah, Megan, could you talk a little bit more about the process of going from having kind of like multiple staff with that technology access and responsibility to having one person? I think that's a huge decision point for folks. And sometimes it makes sense for everybody to enter in their own data, and sometimes it doesn't. And I would just love to hear a little bit about kind of why you started with one decision and how you guys moved to really narrowing it down into one staff role.
Yeah, so the staff that we were originally planning on doing more of that kind of like back end note taking and like entering into the system were our folks that we call account managers. And we had like 3 account managers who we're a staffing agency. So they're the folks that are like basically like doing the initial onboarding, meeting with folks, making their like employment plan with them, finding them a job, helping them with interviews, getting them into the job, supporting them once they're in the job. So the people were doing like the activities were really aligned with SNAP E&T that they were doing. So we were like, oh, it makes the most sense to have them also do the notes because they're the ones doing all of the activities. And then what we didn't necessarily like plan for, or I think like press in our implementation, was the like training and like amount of time it was going to take folks. So I think in order to get all 3 of those folks like comfortable enough with those tasks where it didn't feel like such a burden, I think we like had to like provide a lot more support in our implementation than we actually did. I think we did like a more of like, here's this program, here's why it's going to be helpful to the folks, the participants that we're working with, and here's what we need you to do. And I think there was a lot of resistance from our team, mostly based on like outside things of like, we had an organizational change. So like our staff actually like decreased. So people had other workloads that they were taking on at the same time in general. So that was just kind of like my headphones were going in and out for a second. I think you can still hear me. Yeah, so I think there was some like external, like folks had larger workloads at the same time that we were asking them to like activity. And then it was easier to switch into that subject matter expert position of we had an intern who was already doing like eligibility checks. And it was then easier for the intern to kind of follow through the process because I think they were at the front and the back. So they were doing eligibility checks and they were going to be in the system to work with the coaching reports for the case management. So then it felt like it was easier to just have them connect all the way through and also pull notes from our account managers for supervised job search and job retention, since they were our. Sorry, that was really long-winded.
No, I think that was super helpful to hear how you kind of the different decisions you have to make and sometimes it makes sense to do one way and then things change and you gotta pivot. So we've all been there.
Well, if there's no more question, oh, good, we got one. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, Marissa Turides with Europe United. I was wondering how many people are in your sort of like core group of staff that maybe do the most or have the most responsibility over SNAP related things. And then I have a second question.
So I would say there's like 3 or 4 of us. It was mostly me kind of on the back end, like invoicing, kind of contracts, general administrative stuff. We had our intern who was doing eligibility, a lot of like note taking, things like that, and enrollments and things. And then we had like one account manager who like took to it more, who is more focused on it as well. Yeah, so I think like 3 of us.
And Megan, that's 3 or 4 out of how many?
Oh, good question. There's, I mean, that's most of us. We had another account manager who kind of stepped back and wasn't doing as much. And then our like CFO doesn't do as much day to day. And then we have another person who's out of state and isn't in Vermont. But like basically, so almost all of the Vermont staff are involved.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then my second question was, like, are you, I don't know, are you finding that on an ongoing or like semi-regular basis, you still have to do kind of like staff education on what SNAP E&T is and how do you structure that? Like how like
Yeah,
frequency wise, or how do you go about that?
great question. I think that was something that we didn't think about change management wise when we implemented, where we had our like initial training and then didn't think a lot about like kind of like follow up to support it. And then a few months in, we started doing either weekly or bi-weekly meetings with like as like a team, to really mostly go through like how many eligibility checks did we do this week? Like how many people were eligible? How many people did we get enrolled? How many people are actively in the program right now? And I think the focus on the people was really helpful for us. And then you're focusing on like, okay, who are the people that we have in this program right now? What support can we help get them access to? And how can we be like increasing the services that we're like billing for them based on that? Yeah, so it was mostly keeping it people oriented that helped with that a lot. And then also our like Vermont has like monthly meetings that are like case manager sort of meetings for the different partners in the state. So I think that was helpful as well. But yeah, definitely if you can plan to have like check-ins with folks after you implement to keep iterating, that was definitely helpful and something I wish we had done sooner.
Thank you.
Those are great questions. Very good questions. Thank you so much. Any more questions before I pass it over to Samantha to close us out with next steps? Awesome. I'll pass it to you, Samantha. Thank you.
All right, guys, we are a few minutes early, but I'm sure that is quite all right with everyone. Continue working with your TA team and updating that work plan and your notes in your shared Google folder. Continue meeting one-on-one with your TA team. If you need to reschedule, please reach out directly to them. We can be flexible. And then review and begin working through the staff mapping tool with your TA team. You'll definitely talk about it in your next one-on-one. You will receive a link to the tool, and it's also already on our landing page. So you'll get that in the follow-up email that I send to you after all of these trainings. So you'll have that link directly in that email follow-up. And then looking ahead, our next training is June 18th. And I want to call this out because it's a little bit, it's 1 week earlier than our typical cadence of these trainings. So calling that out, it'll be June 18th. We're going to talk all about SNAP E&T funds, fiscal basics, and mechanics. So I'll think like allowable costs, unallowable costs, breaking all of those things down. So it'll be a good time. Our friends at SJI are leading that conversation. That is all I had for us today. Any final thoughts before I cut you all loose?
Samantha, real quick, if folks have like fiscal staff that would be helpful to bring to that next webinar, can they forward the invite?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good reminder. Yes, if you have fiscal staff that can attend that webinar on the 18th, please forward that invite to them. They are welcome and encouraged to join us. Lisa, I will send it to you. Oh, I will send it to you. If you don't have it on your calendar for June 18th, let me know.
Could you also send it to me? I have every other one, but for some reason that one's not
Zoom is
on there.
It's out to get me, I swear. Thank you, Megan. It was really lovely having you on and chatting today. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.